Picture this. It's 2014, and Five Nights at Freddy's just came out. You're scared out of your socks as a 6-year-old of the animatronics, nearly having nightmares about them. Then, your sister comes in. She goes, FNAF 2 just came out. You go, what? Okay, well that's just an exaggerated version of what it was like for me when FNAF 2 came out. But it's been about a decade since the release of FNAF 2, and the internet has torn this game literally and figuratively to shreds because the character sprites are clipping, and some even defy the laws of physics. Okay, but like who would have really noticed that if they weren't looking for it? Straight off the bat, FNAF 2 is not the best game in the series. I'd say it's somewhere up there in terms of the originals and maybe overall, but also not really. FNAF 2 is a game that I have extreme nostalgia of. I've played hours of FNAF 2 on mobile and other devices more than any other game in the series. But why is this game hated so much in 2024? Let's format this like a review of a new FNAF game and do pros and cons. We'll start with the pros. Now, this game isn't nearly as scary as the original FNAF 1, and it's not even the same type of scary as FNAF 1, but where it is scary, it succeeds. I'm sure you've all heard the warning ambience of this game in a post somewhere, at least. That and also the sound in this game, which is another pro I'll talk about in this game, combines to make this game kind of unnerving still. Instead of being a slow burn towards death in FNAF 1, after night 1 it all just kinda goes full swing. The horror in this game comes from the intensity of having to manage multiple threats at once. When there are animatronics in the event, you have to use the mask. The music box always has to be wound up, and it gets less and less forgiving with each night. Additionally, Withered Foxy is more than likely in your hallway, Toy Bonnie is more than likely in your vent, and Balloon Boy is most likely in the other. Oh! And speaking of Balloon Boy, you annoying piece of game design is both a pro and a con in this game, though I will get into that later. The design of the pizzeria in this game is pretty cool if you ask me. Do you really need to use any other camera rather than the prize corner one? No, but it's the thought that counts. The withers in this game all have really good design. I personally have to hand it to Withered Bonnie for best design, but there are a number of other strong contestants. I think the toys have good design, too. I'm part of the minority here when I say that honestly I like Toy Bonnie. He might be my favorite out of the toys. The puppet is also a really cool addition to this game. People say Golden Freddy in this game is kinda terrible, which I somewhat agree with, but then again his jumpscare in this game is animated compared to FNAF 1, and seeing his head in the hallway is pretty spooky, but you can be the judge of that. This game, much like the first, doesn't offer a ton of lore, apart from the phone calls and the minigames, but the minigames in this game are really cool and get the lore of the second game across without being blatantly obvious or overly vague. It's just in the middle, where it should be. This game, while not having sound design anywhere near as unnerving, succeeds in having excellent sound bites and cues that fit the game pretty well. A great jumpscare sound, and overall no major issues in that department. However, I really can't meat-ride this game like it doesn't have issues. While FNAF 2 is definitely a playable game, make no mistake, the further you go into it, the more it becomes apparent that Scott favored fine-tuning some aspects of this game more than others. On harder nights, like night 4, 5, 6, and God forbid 720, this game can become a nightmare because of the withered animatronics. They will triple whammy you until you literally aren't breathing anymore, and if you think that really isn't so bad, remember the music box? You won't have any time to wind it up. Not to mention, Toy Bonnie is ruthless in the later nights and will attack you on the first camera flip most likely every time, which is something that FNAF speedrunners and challenge runners, what the hell do you call them, I don't know, alike complain about. Also, I know from experience how multiple characters can quite literally be in the same room at once. Like Balloon Boy and Withered Foxy makes sense, but no, two wizards can be in the same room. Remember earlier when I said that the game design in this game is both a pro and a con? Well, here's why. Most of the animatronics in this game kinda do the same thing, which would be fine if they weren't solely restricted to one of those two things. Pretty much, wizards and toys always come through the vents, with the exception of Withered Freddy, Foxy, and Toy Freddy. And the puppet, as well as Golden Freddy, technically not like you see him very often, come through the hallway. I do like the music box mechanic, but it does make it really easy to combat the animatronics at first. On harder nights, it makes things more chaotic, which is probably a product of how rushed this game was, though it does add to the horror, if you ask me. Nearly every FNAF game made in ClickTeam, 5 Laughs doesn't count, it was made by ClickTeam and that's also Unreal Engine, has clipping issues somewhere. But in no other game is it as apparent in FNAF 2 when you really look closely. Mango's second head physically prevents her from crawling through the vents, Withered Chica's head feathers clip through the top of the vents, Withered Bonnie's bow tie clips through his mouth on the icon for the custom night, and Toy Bonnie's knees clip through his stomach during the jumpscare animation. There are a lot more instances of this in this game and other games, but I've made my point clear and there are too many to count all of them. Overall, I'd say that FNAF 2 is not a bad game at all. I think that the issue some people have with this game is that they have all played the later entries in the series, and everyone just kind of forgets about this game sometimes. As a result, people come back to it and realize that it doesn't really stack up quite as well as it may seem like it does. But that doesn't mean it's absolutely terrible or even mediocre at all, I would argue, because it isn't anywhere near that. I think for a game that was made in about 2 months, it's impressive how much of it's got nailed, and the way I see it, this game could have easily been a lot worse. For your average Joe, this is everything FNAF 1 was and more, at least on paper. There is a bit of a nostalgia factor behind this game, I feel like, but even when you strip that away, this game is still a perfectly good FNAF game, and if you don't agree with me on that, then fair, it's your opinion. Altogether, I give this game a 7.5 out of 10.